Bonjour tout le monde. Yesterday, we presented our government's plan to support Canadians through the second wave of COVID-19 and rebuild a strong, resilient economy. There are lots of important measures to cover, but first, I want to start with fighting COVID-19, because right now, job one remains protecting you and your family. To date, we've secured billions of pieces of PPE, tens of millions of rapid test kits, and signed deals for hundreds of millions of doses of 7 vaccine candidates. Canada now has the most diverse portfolio of any country for vaccines. We're in the right place to have access to safe, effective vaccines as soon as possible. As the co-founder of Moderna said over the weekend, Canada was among the first to pre-order their vaccine doses. We are guaranteed some of Moderna's first batch if the vaccine is safe and approved. Already, Moderna has submitted their candidate for Health Canada review, as have Pfizer-BioNTech and AstraZeneca Oxford. And just yesterday, Johnson & Johnson joined this list as the 4th candidate for Health Canada review. As I outlined on Friday, our government is also working around the clock with the provinces and territories and through the new National Operations Centre on the vaccine rollout. We've invested in everything from freezers to needles to be sure we can reach every Canadian who wants a vaccine, no matter where they live. On se tient prêt à distribuer des vaccins aussitôt que possible. Mais avant d'en arriver là, présentement, notre priorité absolue reste encore d'aplatir la courbe et de sauver des vies. C'est pourquoi on continue d'acheter des articles de protection individuelle et de les expédier aux travailleurs de première ligne. On travaille aussi à renforcer les capacités de dépistage des provinces et des territoires. Dans les derniers mois, on a conclu des ententes avec plusieurs fabricants de premier plan pour obtenir jusqu'à 40,5 millions de tests de dépistage rapide. Plus de 5 millions de ces tests ont déjà été distribués aux provinces et aux territoires et les autres suivront. Pendant la deuxième vague, ces tests rapides et précis sont essentiels pour protéger les gens et ralentir la propagation du virus. Ils sont particulièrement importants pour les communautés rurales et éloignées où l'accès aux laboratoires à proximité est limité. En plus du dépistage, on consacre aussi plus de fonds à la modélisation pour mieux suivre et comprendre la propagation du virus et ainsi aider les communautés à rester en sécurité. 8 of every $10 spent in Canada to fight COVID-19 and support Canadians has been spent by the federal government. This includes the investments we've made for PPE, testing, and vaccines. It also includes the historic measures we've rolled out for families, small businesses, young people, and seniors. These are programs that you've relied on to help get you through this crisis, to help put food on your table or afford your rent, to save your small businesses, to keep your job, to make sure we make it through as best as we possibly can all together. In the second wave, you may still need that support. We all remember what happened when the previous government cut support too quickly following the 2008-2009 recession. That will not be our approach. We'll continue to be there for the middle class and those working hard to join it, whatever it takes, as long as it takes, until we get through this pandemic. Today, we saw new data released by Statistics Canada that shows significant economic growth over the past few months. This goes to show that the investments we've made in Canadians have helped families and businesses stay afloat. There are still tough times ahead. So we'll continue to be there for people, especially those who are hardest hit by this crisis. On se rappelle tous ce qui s'est passé quand le gouvernement précédent a retiré le soutien trop rapidement pendant la crise de 2008-2009. On ne va pas faire ça. On va rester là pour la classe moyenne et ceux qui travaillent fort pour en faire partie. On fera tout ce qu'il faut aussi longtemps qu'il faudra. L'énoncé économique de l'automne présenté hier par la vice-première ministre expose l'éventail de nouvelles mesures que nous prenons pour aider les Canadiens durant cette crise. Pour les familles ayant des enfants âgés de moins de 6 ans, nous allons bonifier l'allocation canadienne pour enfants avec un soutien temporaire allant jusqu'à 1 200 $ de plus. Pour les jeunes, nous allons éliminer les taux d'intérêt sur les prêts étudiants pour une période d'1 an. Pour les petites entreprises et les travailleurs, nous allons renforcer la subvention salariale. Pour les agriculteurs, nous allons investir 2 milliards de dollars pour aider les producteurs de lait, de volaille et d'œufs soumis à la gestion de l'offre. On sera là pour vous, votre famille et votre communauté, durant cette deuxième vague. Ensemble, on va traverser cette épreuve. Ensemble, on va en ressortir encore plus fort. With vaccines on the horizon, the end of this crisis is in sight. And that means it is time to take a look at what's coming next. We have an ambitious plan to rebuild a strong, resilient economy that works for everyone. To help get there, our government will introduce a historic and appropriate stimulus plan of 3 to 4% of GDP. This will be a significant investment to get our economy back on track, and it's an investment that will make sure that no one gets left behind. We need to address the very real gaps this crisis has laid bare for women, for Black and racialized Canadians, for young people, and for Indigenous people. Because we are all better off when everyone can contribute to their full potential. En effectuant des investissements judicieux et ciblés, on peut rebâtir un Canada plus fort et plus juste. On peut investir dans les changements climatiques, dans les mesures climatiques comme les améliorations énergétiques résidentielles qui favorisent la création de bons emplois pour la classe moyenne ainsi que l'établissement d'une économie compétitive et propre pour les années à venir. Cette crise ne va pas durer éternellement. Le plan que la vice-présidente a présenté hier repose sur une position financière solide et expose des mesures responsables pour aller de l'avant. On a connu une année difficile, mais les mois à venir auront aussi leurs difficultés. Mais on a un plan pour aider les Canadiens à traverser cette crise et pour bâtir un Canada meilleur et plus fort pour tous. The fall economic statement we presented yesterday is our roadmap for the path ahead. But our response to this crisis doesn't end there. On that note, I can confirm that our government is providing additional support to 2 more communities facing very serious local outbreaks. To begin with, the Canadian Red Cross will be providing assistance to the government of Nunavut to control the spread of COVID-19 and keep people safe. For the community of Arviat, the Red Cross is deploying specialists on the ground, as well as providing rapid testing support at the Winnipeg isolation site before people return to Nunavut. We've also approved a request for assistance for Hatchet Lake First Nation in Saskatchewan for the Canadian Rangers until at least December 26th. Along with members of the community, the Rangers will be there to help with everything from health services to support for elders. When we invest in support for communities and for local organizations, we invest in Canadians. I think of the story I shared back in March about Samaritan House in Brandon, Manitoba. Thanks to the funding we provided in the spring, Samaritan House was able to extend the hours at their shelter and stock up their food bank. Today, I was told that they are now expanding their programs to reach even more people in need. Whether with funding for shelters, new support for small businesses, or investments in vaccines, we've got your back. There may be tough days ahead, but together, we'll get through them. On a tous un rôle à jouer dans la lutte contre la COVID-19. Peu importe qui vous êtes, vous pouvez changer les choses. Si vous portez le masque et gardez vos distances, vos proches seront en sécurité. Si vous évitez les rassemblements et utilisez l'application Alerte COVID, vous sauvez des vies. Je sais que les semaines à venir ne seront pas faciles, mais on va passer à travers ensemble. Merci tout le monde.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll start on the phone with questions. One question, one follow-up. Operator.
Thank you. Merci. Première question, Raymond Filion. À vous.
Merci. Bonjour, M. le Premier ministre. J'aimerais parler du financement de la santé. On sait que vous allez en discuter avec les premiers ministres le 10 décembre. Aucun montant n'a été annoncé hier dans votre mise à jour économique. Est-ce que ça veut dire que vous allez arriver les mains vides à la rencontre?
Au contraire, dans l'énoncé économique, Raymond, on a parlé des investissements sans précédent qu'on a fait dans les systèmes de santé pour aider les provinces. On parle d'1 milliard de dollars directement pour les provinces, en plus des transferts de santé habituels. On parle de 25 milliards de dollars pour la relance sécuritaire, qui comprend de l'argent pour de retour à l'école et pour les plus vulnérables. Au total, en les investissements reliés à la santé, on parle d'une hausse de presque 25% des transferts, de l'équivalent des transferts en santé de cette année. On va continuer d'être là pour aider les provinces à passer à travers cette crise et j'ai hâte d'avoir cette conversation la semaine prochaine sur ce qu'on va faire dans les années d'après quand on aura passé à travers cette crise. Mais notre priorité maintenant, c'est d'être là pour aider les Canadiens à travers le pays avec des appuis pour le système de santé maintenant.
Ray?
Oui, mais ce que les premiers ministres demandent, ils disent que c'est insuffisant, là. Ils demandent des milliards supplémentaires en transferts annuels. D'où pourrait provenir cet argent, dans la mesure où c'est pas budgété dans l'énoncé d'hier? Est-ce que vous êtes prêt à creuser le déficit encore plus? Ou cet argent-là pourrait provenir du futur plan de relance de 70 à 100 milliards que Mme Freeland a annoncé hier?
On est là pour parler avec les premiers ministres la semaine prochaine des dépenses et des investissements qu'on va pouvoir faire ensemble dans les années à venir. Mais maintenant, vous allez comprendre que notre priorité, c'est d'aider les Canadiens à passer à travers cette crise-ci. On est dans un moment sans précédent. On a fait des investissements ponctuel et responsable et on va continuer de regarder ce qu'on doit faire maintenant. Évidemment, il va y avoir des conversations sur ce qui se passera après et on va entamer ces conversations la semaine prochaine.
Merci. Prochaine question. Operator.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Bill Curry, The Globe and Mail. Line open.
Thanks, Prime Minister. Just to follow up on Raymond's questions there. This week's update says a $1 billion transfer to the provinces for long-term care will be contingent on the provinces providing detailed reporting on how the money is spent. Will you also be requiring detailed reporting on any new health transfers as you look ahead to the First Minister's meeting next week?
We're going to be talking about all that as we meet next week, but I think the important thing is to look at what we need to do right now. Right now, Canadians are suffering. Right now, in our long-term care system, right across the country, we've seen very, very real challenges. We saw them during the first wave. We stepped up as a federal government to support the provinces, get things back under control, but we continue to see too many deaths, too many vulnerable seniors in long-term care facilities right across the country. That's why we're moving forward with $1 billion more to help our seniors who are so vulnerable with extra supports for infection prevention and control. It's something that all experts are highlighting as one of those necessary things in long-term care facilities. It's certainly something that the Canadian Armed Forces and the Red Crosses have seen as a point of crisis. So we are there to help the provinces. We are there to continue to move forward on things that are going to help.
Follow-up, Bill?
Yeah, just to go back to the numbers, the update says total federal transfers this year will be $99.7 billion, but then next year it's going to drop to $82.1 billion. So is that the plan, or are you going to put more money to the provinces through these negotiations and ultimately a bigger deficit than what you forecasted yesterday?
We're going to have conversations with the provinces about what their needs are right now through this pandemic, and we're all going to take a look at what the needs could be after this pandemic is through. But obviously, our priority, as we've said repeatedly to Canadians, is we're going to be there for you. The federal government has spent $8 out of every $10 invested in supporting Canadians through this COVID-19 crisis. That has had direct implications on healthcare and on the supports Canadians are getting. We're going to continue to be there for Canadians. I look forward to that conversation with the premiers to look at how we can ensure that we are supporting people right now and that our healthcare systems are sustainable into the future.
Thank you. Next question, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Hélène Buzetti, Le Devoir. À vous.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. J'aimerais revenir à ce 1 200 $ par enfant de moins de 6 ans qui est offert dans la mise à jour économique. J'aimerais savoir en quoi les parents d'enfants de moins de 6 ans sont plus financièrement affectés par la pandémie que ceux qui ont des enfants de, disons, 8 ans ou ceux qui sont, par exemple, au salaire minimum et qui n'ont tout simplement pas d'enfants. Pourquoi privilégier ce groupe-là en particulier?
Depuis les débuts, avec l'allocation canadienne aux enfants qu'on a amenée en 2016, quand on s'est fait élire, on faisait une distinction entre les enfants de 6 ans et moins et les enfants entre 7 ans et 18 ans. Parce qu'on reconnaît qu'une fois qu'un enfant est à l'école, il y a moins de coûts, il y a moins de préoccupations financières pour les familles. Ils ont quand même besoin d'argent et c'est pour ça qu'on a été très généreux dès le début. Mais on reconnaît que dans cette situation particulière, avec les défis face à la petite enfance, de l'argent de plus directement dans la poche des familles est importante. Donc, on va donner pour les familles de la classe moyenne et qui travaillent fort pour s'y joindre de l'aide jusqu'à 1 200 $ par enfant pour l'année prochaine pour aider avec toutes les dépenses pour les enfants en dessous de 6 ans.
Mais la question, M. Trudeau, c'est à quel besoin est-ce que ça répond vraiment dans un contexte où on est en déficit de presque 400 milliards de dollars? Vous avez le Parti conservateur qui vous accuse, et je cite ici, de brûler de l'argent. Alors, quand on voit que vous êtes, on n'a pas vraiment d'explication sur la rationalité de ce versement-là, comment ne pas leur donner raison?
Je pense qu'on n'a qu'à parler avec les Canadiens d'un bout à l'autre de ce pays pour qui l'argent qu'on a envoyé pour aider les familles, les travailleurs, les aînés, les étudiants à passer à travers cette pandémie, on a à leur parler que pour entendre à quel point ça fait une différence. Tu sais, les gens payent à peu près 19 % en intérêt sur leur carte de crédit. Nous, on ne voulait pas que les gens mettent plus sur leur carte de crédit et s'endettent encore plus. Alors, en tant que gouvernement fédéral, on a choisi d'emprunter de l'argent pour envoyer ça aux Canadiens. Parce que nous, on emprunte à quasiment 0 % ces jours-ci. Évidemment, ça va prendre de l'argent pour passer à travers cette pandémie. Et le gouvernement fédéral a pris la décision d'être là pour les familles, d'être là pour les petites entreprises, d'être là pour ceux qui ont des enfants. Ça a été une des raisons pour laquelle le Canada est en train de passer à travers cette pandémie en meilleure position que beaucoup de gens parce qu'on a compris qu'il n'y avait pas de choix à faire entre la santé des gens et la santé financière, que pour avoir les deux en même temps, il fallait qu'on investisse. Je comprends que le Parti conservateur aurait pas fait ça. Je comprends que depuis les débuts, le Parti conservateur a dit non, vous auriez dû aider plus les entreprises et moins les familles. Mais c'est pas notre approche. Notre approche, comme je l'ai promis aux Canadiens, c'est qu'on va être là pour vous appuyer, quoi qu'il se passe, et pendant aussi longtemps qu'on en a besoin. Et ça, de reconnaître que les familles avec des jeunes enfants ont des coûts supplémentaires dans ces moments de défi, c'est quelque chose qu'on fait depuis les débuts.
Hello, Prime Minister. Mike Blanchfield, Canadian Press. I wanted to ask you about how you see the Health Canada approval process unfolding for the vaccines. Will Canada be able to accept advance shipments of vaccines prior to Health Canada approval so that they're here on soil and available for distribution? And if a Health Canada approval takes a bit longer than U.S. regulators because of your comments previously about wanting to get this right, should Canadians be prepared for the possibility they might not get a vaccine before they see Americans getting them? What do you say? What will you say to them then?
Our top responsibility is keeping Canadians safe. Now, in this COVID pandemic, keeping Canadians safe means getting a vaccine as quickly as possible. But it also means making sure that that vaccine is safe for Canadians. We will watch carefully what's going on around the world. Our Health Canada regulators are paying close attention at the same time as they are currently evaluating the 4 top vaccines that have come forward right now. We will ensure that all the steps are taken to make sure they're safe for Canadians, so that when we start rolling them out to Canadians, people can get that vaccine with confidence and know that we are getting through this pandemic together. But we know there are many different vaccine candidates out there. Some are going to be more effective than others. Some are going to arrive more quickly than others. And that's why back in the spring, we signed deals with, in the summer, we signed deals with 7 different vaccine companies because we didn't know which one would land first or which one would face extra bumps in the road or not. So we made sure that of all the possible vaccines, Canadians have access to the range of them and to, quite frankly, more doses potentially per capita than any other country in the world. Because every step of the way, we made a promise to Canadians that we'd get them through this, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Kevin Gallagher with CTV News. Prime Minister, we know that once vaccines start arriving in Canada, they will be prioritized for vulnerable seniors and healthcare workers. Where does that list go from there, and how much say will the provinces have in determining what the priority will be for, say, first responders, teachers, maybe politicians like yourself, sir? Where are you on that list? So give us an idea about that plan of prioritization and how much say the provinces will have in it.
Those are very much conversations that are ongoing right now. Obviously, as you pointed out, the priority is to get it out to the most vulnerable Canadians quickly. But we have a panel of top experts and scientists looking in directly to these challenging ethical and societal questions of who gets the vaccine's access first. We talked about it with the provinces last week on our 22nd First Minister's call, and there was a lot of number of perspectives, but there seemed to be a consensus that we should all agree across the country on what that list looks like and make sure that it is applied fairly right across the country. There are more conversations to come, and we will keep Canadians informed as we determine what that right order of priority is. The other element of it is certain vaccines might be more effective with certain populations versus others, and that's why the experts are going to be so important in making determinations around what is the best path to move forward for our country. Okay. Nous avons mis en place un groupe d'experts et de scientifiques de renom pour regarder exactement cette question de comment prioriser différentes populations par rapport à l'accès aux vaccins. J'en ai parlé avec les premiers ministres la semaine passée. On est d'accord qu'il va falloir qu'on s'organise pour être enligné dans les populations qui vont être prioritaires et sur le travail que nous allons faire à travers le pays. Je pense que les Canadiens s'attendent à ce que ce soit équitable, mais en même temps, c'est pas les politiciens qui vont décider, ça va être basé sur les recommandations des experts et des scientifiques parce qu'on reconnaît que différents vaccins peuvent avoir différents impacts sur les aînés, sur des gens plus jeunes, sur des gens de certaines communautés et d'optimiser l'impact de ces vaccins, c'est aussi une préoccupation scientifique.
Hi, Prime Minister. Tom Perry, CBC. Can I ask you a little bit about this Johnson & Johnson vaccine that you're looking at, how that changes the equation, or does it change the equation in terms of when Canadians might see a vaccine? Can I ask you as well, specifically, what more information do you need before you can say, okay, here's when you're going to get a vaccine? And just to follow up on Kevin's, do you think that you're part of a priority group? Will you be one of the first people getting a vaccine when one is available?
The 4 vaccines that Health Canada is looking at right now, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca, are all undergoing a process that Health Canada has accelerated, but is ensuring that we're not cutting any corners. As we approve vaccines, we will be able to roll them out to Canadians, and we're working to do that, like everyone is around the world, as quickly as possible while remaining safe. And I will highlight that there are right now no vaccines vaccines anywhere in the world approved for use by the general population. Everyone is working extremely hard. We're all sharing data. We're all making sure that we're trying to make the right decision as quickly as possible to both keep people safe and move through this as quickly as possible. We will continue to do that work and continue to work with each company on the particularities. But again, because we were so early in signing deals with so many different vaccine producers, we actually have a very good position for receiving vaccines and being able to distribute them to Canadians. But those conversations are obviously ongoing, and ultimately getting to the starting line is something we're all focused on. But we also need to be focused on getting to that finish line and getting the majority of Canadians vaccinated. And that's where having potentially more doses per capita for Canadians than anyone else is going to be very helpful to us. In regards to where politicians are on that list, again, I'm going to trust experts to make the right determination of what the priority populations are.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau. Laurence Martin, Radio-Canada. Ce matin, vous avez dit en entrevue que vous vous inquiétiez d'avoir de nouvelles dépenses récurrentes en santé. Est-ce que ça veut dire que les transferts récurrents vers les provinces, je ne parle pas de dépenses ponctuelles, de transferts récurrents vers les provinces, ne vont pas augmenter au-delà de l'entente actuelle?
On va voir ces discussions avec les provinces la semaine prochaine. Comme j'ai dit plusieurs fois, comme vous dites, les dépenses ponctuelles, nous allons être là pour aider les Canadiens et les provinces et nos systèmes de santé et nos entreprises et nos aînés à passer à travers cette pandémie. Le gouvernement fédéral va continuer d'être là pour faire tout ce qu'on a besoin de faire pour aider les Canadiens à passer à travers. Une fois qu'on passe à travers cette pandémie, effectivement, on va continuer d'avoir des besoins d'investir dans le système de santé, de préparer l'avenir du système de santé, et nous allons avoir ces conversations avec les provinces la semaine prochaine. J'ai hâte d'avoir ces conversations sur l'avenir de notre système de santé. Je vais écouter les provinces, mais comme j'ai dit, on n'allait pas annoncer dans cet énoncé économique des investissements récurrents à long terme quand notre emphase et la priorité doit être sur le contexte actuel. I think one of the things we all know is that we need to do everything we can to support people right now through this pandemic. And that's where the federal government has stepped up to support the provinces with billions, $25 billion in safe restart agreements, in back-to-school agreements, in supports for vulnerable workers. We have continued to be there directly to support the provinces, including increasing healthcare transfers significantly this year, while at the same time we've been there directly for Canadians, for families, for young people, for seniors, for workers who've been laid off, for small businesses, for industries. We are going to be there and continue to be there for Canadians. That's our focus right now. Obviously, as we get through this pandemic, we do need to reflect on the future of our healthcare system, and that's why I'm looking forward to having those conversations with the premiers. But we weren't going to build in recurrent long-term funding in our economic update when those conversations haven't happened yet with the premiers, and where our focus, quite rightly, needs to be on the contextual and punctual spending we are doing responsibly to move forward through this pandemic.
Hi, Prime Minister. Mercedes Stevenson, Global News. You're introducing historic spending in the fiscal update that you presented yesterday, and your Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland talked about there being guardrails. But there's not a lot of details about what the triggers in those guardrails are. Will you be disclosing to Canadians what the amounts of things like total hours worked or the employment rate are that will guide your stimulus spending, and will you be putting the spending to a confidence vote?
As we've seen in recommendations from the International Monetary Fund, from the World Bank, from global financial institutions who've said, do not make the same mistakes that were made by many countries, including by this country under the previous government, of turning off the taps too quickly after a recession. In the 2008-2009 recession, spending was scaled back too quickly, and that austerity hurt Canadians. What we are going to be doing is continuing to be there as long as it takes for Canadians to get through this pandemic and kickstart the economy once again so it can come properly roaring back. That's why we've set aside 3 to 4% of GDP as that fiscal stimulus once we are through this pandemic. We know that that's how you ensure the long-term health of our economy, the long-term sustainability of our finances, is by making sure that the destruction wreaked on our economy by this pandemic is minimized. That's why the federal government has stepped up with 8 out of every $10 spent on supporting Canadians through this directly from the federal government. So we're going to do this responsibly. We're going to keep in mind that we came into this pandemic with the best fiscal position of any country in the G7, and we still have that best comparative fiscal position, and we're going to continue to maintain that and look to get back to a path that is long-term sustainable. But right now, while this pandemic is going on, we know the best thing to do for people's health, but also the best thing to do for the economy, is to be there to support small businesses every step of the way, to be there to support workers every step of the way, and to prevent Canadians from having to go into credit card debt at $19% interest rates when we can borrow at near 0% interest rates. That's why we've stepped up as a federal government, and that's why it is sustainable for the longer term.
With all due respect, Prime Minister, that doesn't answer the question of what the fiscal guardrails look like or whether you'll put it to a confidence vote. But we have one last question. So I'd like to ask you about a statement the lobbying commissioner made at committee last week, saying that 3 cases she was looking into have been referred to the RCMP for criminal investigation. Are you aware of whether any of those cases involve the We Charity or the husband of your chief of staff, Rob Silver?
First of all, on the question of the confidence vote, this is a fall economic statement. This is an economic measures that, of course, will be a matter of confidence. But I am reasonably confident that none of the opposition parties wants an election right now. We certainly don't want one. We want to get these supports out to Canadians, and there are certainly things in this fall economic statement that every party should be able to support in terms of helping Canadians. In regards to the investigations, I have no information on that. Merci tout le monde.